Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Nathan and today we are covering another feat that was updated under the 2024 rules, Defensive Duelist. Now this is a feat that was kind of mediocre to okay before, but it's actually really good now. So here is our agenda for this video. I'm going to give an overview of the feat, kind of talk about generally what it does, what was changed. I'll talk about some use cases for where you might want to use this in some of your character builds, and then I'll go through a specific use case I'm calling the weapon swap tech. So let us jump right into the overview of the feat. So Defensive Duelist is a general feat. It requires level 4 or higher and at least 13 dexterity. It increases your dexterity by 1 to a maximum of 20, and then it gives you this feature called Parry, which says that if we're holding a finesse weapon and another creature hits us with a melee attack, we can take a reaction to add our proficiency bonus to our armor class, potentially causing the attack to miss us, and we retain this bonus to our armor class against all melee attacks until the start of our next turn. Now, when you first pick this up at level 4, your proficiency bonus is only going to be 2, so it's not the best then. However, this does get better and better as you level up and your proficiency bonus goes up. And importantly, unlike other reaction options that boost your armor class, this one has unlimited uses, unlike, say, the shield spell, which requires you to spend a first level or higher spell slot. So, here are the things that changed since the 2014 version of this feat. It now requires at least level 4, pretty much like all feats. It also boosts your dexterity. That is a big thing. It didn't used to provide any stat increase at all. Additionally, the bonus to your armor class used to only last for the triggering melee attack and not against all melee attacks. So that is a big deal. And this is, something that you have all the time and applies against all attacks, can be very reliable. Additionally, it used to require proficiency with the weapon that you were holding. It doesn't require that anymore. I don't know how big of a deal that is, but I don't think it's a super huge thing. So let us talk about some use cases for this feat. Now, generally speaking, if you're a finesse weapon melee build, whether you're strength or dex primary, this can be a great feat for you. And this is probably really obvious. As long as you meet the stat requirement, this is an on-demand way to increase your armor class. Most monsters in the game, well, a good majority of them are melee only. There are some that have range attacks, but this is a feat that can potentially protect you against a lot of monsters in the game. So whether you're dual wielding or using a weapon and a shield, or you're using the double-bladed scimitar, this could work for a barbarian, a fighter, a monk, a paladin, a ranger, a rogue, or some multi-class combination there. I think, like, for example, a barbarian rogue build with a double-bladed scimitar would be a great candidate for this. If you are a blade-packed warlock and using a finesse weapon, you could use your charisma, and you could also be eligible potentially for this feat if you met the dexterity requirement. The important thing about the finesse tag is it allows you to use your dexterity for your attacks and damage with the weapon instead of strength, but it's not it's optional. So you can still use a finesse weapon on a strength build. And especially on warlocks who don't get easy access to the shield spell, this could be a great way to boost the survivability of your character. Another kind of type of build that can use Defensive Duelist well are close range caster builds that don't have access to the shield spell. Now, most characters have proficiency with daggers, and a dagger is a finesse weapon, so if your character just wants to hold a dagger, you're potentially eligible for this feat. Some caster builds that are close range that don't have the shield spell unless you took Magic Initiate to get it as your origin feat include Cleric, Druid, and once again Warlock. And again, Warlock is actually a really good candidate for using this feat because you don't have the spell slots to spam shield or other kind of defensive spells. Additionally, if you are a two-hand weapon build, you can actually make pretty good use of this feat via swap tech, which is what I'm going to talk about in the next set of slides. So, the swap tech. So, let me explain how this works. So, the condition to get the reaction, you need to be holding a finesse weapon. Now, due to some of the way the rules changed around object interactions, we can use these to make sure we have the finesse weapon out at the end of our turn. So, the two-handed property, first of all, doesn't preclude you from just holding your big kind of axe or whatever in one hand. You just can't attack with it unless it's in two hands. So you can easily take one hand off the axe. Next, we get one free object interaction per turn plus one draw or stow per attack from the attack action. So this means that we can, potentially have the weapon out at the end of our turn and then put it away on the next turn before it actually interferes with any attack with your two-handed weapon. So this means that you draw your finesse weapon after the last attack from the attack action using that free draw or stow there. So you have your finesse weapon in one hand and holding on to your two-hander in the other. And then at the start of your next turn, you use your object interaction to just sheath that finesse weapon so you have it out to potentially make that reaction to defend yourself. Now, who can take advantage of this particular weapon swap tech method? Well, if you're a two-handed barbarian, it should be pretty easy. You should be able to meet the dexterity requirement there. You'll probably want it for your medium armor. If you're a two-handed fighter build and have the dex, you can maybe fit it in, especially because fighters get more feats. If you are a strength-based ranger, you can probably squeeze this in pretty easy because, again, assuming you want to spend a feat on it, because you will probably have the dexterity. And then if you're a bow user, you can also squeeze this in if you want to boost your armor class. Now, I presented this idea to a few people, and they gave me some questions that I think I should throw my answers by here in case these are some of the ones you're thinking of too. So the first one is this kind of swap tech realistic? And as I was thinking about this, I think about, if you're an archer, let's say an enemy is closing on you, you lower your bow and pull out a weapon to use in short range. That seems pretty realistic to me. Or if you're a pikeman who is a soldier who uses a long spear, as an enemy kind of steps inside your reach, you take a hand off your pike and pull out a sword. And both those seem like kind of realistic uses, for me at least, for potentially doing this. The next question, is this fair? So important things to note about Defensive Duelist: it only protects you against melee attacks, not range attacks like its closest competitor, the shield spell. It requires you to have at least 13 dexterity, so that's potentially an investment in stats. It requires you to spend a feat on it. And again, compare this to using your origin feat or a multi-class dip to get the shield spell, and you'll see that there's a lot of opportunity cost here to get Defensive Duelist. Additionally, it potentially makes your melee opportunity attacks worse, because if an enemy, provokes an opportunity attack and you use your reaction, you're going to have to use that finesse weapon you have out in one hand instead of your main two-hander. So again, I think it has a lot of opportunity cost, and it's not strictly better than any of the other kind of intended options like shield and that kind of thing. So I would say that this tech is fair and isn't like exploitive in any way. So I want to introduce here something I call the weapon juggling ethicality scale, to kind of talk about techniques involving this, because I think this is going to be a good thing to kind of have around, because I'm probably going to be talking about weapon swap things on future videos. So on one end, on the left over there, we have what I would consider an ethical rules as intended use of weapon juggling or weapon swapping. And all the way on the right, we have what I would consider to be an unethical use of weapon juggling, or basically an exploit. So let me give you an example of a couple of these things, and then I'll kind of place the Defensive Duelist swap tech on this kind of line. So the most ethical rules as intended example of weapon swapping is mastery combos. So when the developers were kind of talking about the 2024 rules during the release, one of the things they talked about was using the attack action swap rules to be able to combine multiple masteries. For example, you use a push weapon to set up enemies to be in position to hit them with a cleave attack. And so we know that swapping on your turn to combine multiple masteries is definitely something they intended to do with these rules. Now, something that I would consider an unethical or exploitive use of these rules is something that the community and I call fake dual wielding. So what this is you hold your shield in one hand, and then in your other hand you are juggling scimitars. So basically attack, sheath, draw the other scimitar, attack, sheath. And what this does is we get to take advantage of the light property, which is intended for dual wielding, while being able to enjoy the extra armor class of a shield. You can also use the dueling fighting style and the two weapon fighting style at the same time, and this lets you basically you get all the benefits of dual wielding, but also all the benefits of using a shield at the same time, just because you're sheathing and unsheathing a pair of scimitars. And this is more what I would consider an exploit of these rules. While this does work rules as written, I don't think this is the intended way to play a dual wielder whatsoever, and it is strictly better than just dual wielding and having your weapons in both hands, because you get to enjoy that extra armor class. Now, where do we put the Defensive Duelist weapon swap tech? I'm going to put it pretty close to the left over here. I'd say it's maybe not quite as rules intended as mastery combos, but this technique is very, very close to swapping to a specific weapon to have a mastery property available for a reaction attack. So for example, if you have a polearm master character and you were using a halberd for cleave, but you swap to a pike at the end of your turn to be able to potentially use the push mastery with the polearm master reaction attack, this is very, very similar. You're pulling out a finesse weapon to have access to a specific reaction that you got from a feat. It is a little bit of inventory tracking to kind of, say I have a finesse weapon out at the end of my turn. But honestly, I don't really think it's that much. And I do personally think this particular method is fair and realistic. Although, of course, if you think differently, you are totally free to do that. So thanks for watching. This has been our overview on Defensive Duelist. I think overall, this feat is really good now and is worth taking a look at on a lot of builds, especially if you're going to be melee and in short range. I also, for you, the viewer, would you consider the swap a fair technique? Would you put it on a different place on this gradient? Let me know in the comments. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed. My name is Nathan. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.